All right, I want to tell you just a little bit more about Daddy. His character was, I think, that once he conquered something, he moved on to something else. That's why I think he owned so many different businesses. But at one point, he told us that he had bought a bird dog, a very expensive bird dog, and he put it with a trainer. I don't know who the trainer was. I wish I did. He referred to the dog as Old Blue. And I know at some point, Old Blue was taken to Grand Junction, Tennessee, to the National Bird Dog, whatever they call it, and was some sort of a champion there. He saw the bird dog. None of us ever saw the dog because he had never came home. It was always with the trainer. Now, I don't know if it was put in his name or the trainer's name or their joint name. So that was the bird dog story. Then when I was at the university, this is a funny story, he brought me a new car. He called me and told me he was coming to Fayetteville and he'd switch cars with me, and I said, okay. And I thought, why am I getting a new car? I had a beautiful convertible. But he bought me a retractable hardtop, which they don't make anymore. It was an absolutely gorgeous car, and it was pale yellow because that was my favorite color. But he got to, when he finally got to Fayetteville, he said he was so mad he had stopped at Conway to eat, and he locked the car, and he locked the keys in the car. So he had to break the window to get in the car. So he was going. He had all his fishing gear. He was going to do some trout fishing, he said. So anyway, he left me with the broken window to get it fixed. He arranged for all that, and took my little Ford convertible and went on to go fishing. And at that time, he held the state record for the largest. I think it was either a speckled brown trout or rainbow trout, one or the other. And I know it was caught in the Hardy region, and he never went fishing again. That was just part of his character. He just moved on. And he never bragged about anything, You just slowly found things out like that about him, He was just that kind of a man. He helped a lot of people, and when he died, there were a lot of IOUs in his lockbox, which we never made any attempt to collect because we knew we couldn't. I know one time when I first went away to college, he gave me a very small lady's gun. It was about like that. And the clip in it it was very pretty and showed me how to use it. And he said, we're going to put this in your car and we're going to lock it in what are those boxes called, that you lock, glove box. And he took the clip out, but he said, since you're driving alone, you need to always keep it in there, but never, ever keep it unlocked. So I had that gun, and I know that someone had pawned that to him, for when they needed some money. And I remember a diamond ring that came that way. And several years ago, a young man from Lepanto who was my age named Brady Pilot, who's a dentist somewhere now, called me and said, Joyce, do you know where my daddy's shotgun is? I said, what are you talking about? He said, Daddy was an alcoholic and he got in a lot of trouble and he loaned some money. Your dad loaned him money and he left the shotgun. And I said, Brady, I never heard of it, don't know anything about it. He said, do you think Spud does? And I said, Spud had passed away at that time. I said, no. I said, and my daddy never ever mentioned that to me. I didn't know it. And he said, well, of course, Daddy never paid him back, but I was just going to see if I could buy it. And I said, well, if I had it, I would give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't, it just, but a lot of people, I mean, he didn't want to keep their things, but they would insist, that you take this or that, and I remember there was a woman named Gwen, I can't remember her husband, and she was a friend of Mother's, and she needed money. She moved to California, and I know there was quite a bit of money that changed hands at that time, and I know that's where the diamond ring came from. But I also know that he gave her the diamond ring back. And I know he never got his money back, but he didn't seem to be important to him.
Mm-hmm.
So he helped a lot of family members. He put them on their feet. He supported a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I do mean fully supported them. But anyway, that was just the way it was. Good man.
I remember being, a child and the feeling of absolute pride not being able to see the end of the line of cars that were coming to his funeral.
Oh, yeah. He would have loved that funeral.
And I also remember being a child and so many strangers, people I didn't know, coming to me and telling me what a wonderful man he was and how they had helped him in some way with a little story. And I remember one man telling me that even though he was one of the richest men in town, that he always still came back to him and bought his car every single year. I'm sure that was long after he sold his dealership. And that he could have gone anywhere to buy that car, but he always came and bought it from him. I don't remember his name. And I remember somebody telling me the story that they were so poor and they didn't have money for milk, but that every morning when they would go out, the fresh milk would be there on the doorstep, and that they never, ever said a word. They just left the milk. They knew they needed it, and they left it for them.
Well, Daddy had a hard life, and this was so funny because his favorite piece of the chicken was the wing, and there's nothing on the wing, it's just... But we always had to save the wing for Daddy, so I asked him one time, I said, why do you like the wing? There's no meat on it. He said, well, when you're in a big family and the platter's passed around, that's what it's left when it got to me, so I liked him. But he did have a hard life in many ways, but in many ways he made up for it. I think he had a good life, and he had good principles.
You probably never know how hard it really was in the beginning.
No, but everybody had a hard lives back then, particularly in the rural areas,
Yeah.
But it was, I remember one other thing he told me one time, when I was an adult he said, let me give you a piece of advice. He said, when you're involved in something, whether it's a relationship or a business deal or whatever it is, ask yourself 3 questions. What's the deal? Who am I dealing with? And what's in it for me? And he said, this is not necessarily financial. When I say what's in it for me, what am I going to gain or lose of myself or for others? Or, self-respect. When you look at all of those aspects of whatever relationship you're in. Mm-hmm. And at first I thought it was rather a callous thing to say, but as I've grown older, I've realized that it was a very wise statement. Because it's not talking about just financial when you say, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Is this going to enrich my life? Is it going to hurt someone else? I mean, it's a good thing to think about. Mm-hmm. And he told me one other thing when I went away to college. He said, don't ever date anybody you wouldn't marry. And I have found that to be a very, what he was saying was, he said, the more you have in common with your spouse, the better chances are that you're both going to be happy. Mm-hmm. So that's what he meant when he was saying that to me. Don't ever date anybody you wouldn't marry. Then that way you'll never screw up, So look for your own kind, I think is what he was saying. Yeah. And I think that's a very good thing to think about.
I remember, and forever and ever and ever, I kept my name, even after marriage, I kept Richardson as my middle name. Because I was so proud of that to be my middle name.
Alan, after he graduated from law school, he told me this one time. He was at some sort of a banquet, and he was seated next to this other guy. And he said, the man turned to him and he said, you're Doc Richardson's grandson, aren't you? And he said, yes. He said, I would have given anything if he'd been my grandfather. Wow. That was a pretty fabulous statement, I thought. Yeah.
But I also remember him telling me that from a little girl that I wasn't like the other children.
Oh, no. You were a golden girl. That's what he always told me.
And, you're a Richardson. And you're made of good stock. And you're better than them. So I expect more of you. And because he said so, I knew it was true.
Well, he called me he called me a golden girl. His idea of a golden girl was you're pretty, you're smarter, you're quicker, you're nicer. That's what a golden girl is. That was what he told. And I believed him for a long time.
Oh, for sure.
He said, I thought everybody loved me when I walked down the street. But life's not like that. But what it does, it puts a lot of positive emphasis on a child's life. Mm-hmm. And that's
I
why,
expected more of myself
Oh, yeah.
because I knew that I was made of good stock. I
Yeah.
was a Richardson, and,
Yeah.
and my granddaddy said that I was special, so I was.
after I went into business and was so successful with my agency, I used to wish every day that Daddy was there. He would have been so proud of
Yeah.
me. In fact, he'd have been in that office doing a deposit, taking it to the bank for me. He would have been doing something
Hmm.
to help me.
Yeah, and everything that I've achieved, I've
Oh, he
always
would
thought,
just adore you, Kim.
I've always thought that he would
have.
have been proud of me.
He'd look at his grandchildren and be so happy.
Oh, I know he would. He would.
He'd look at it and be so happy.
He really, really would. He was a special, special man.
Really.
Always figuring, always had the piece of paper and
Oh,
the
yeah.
pencil doing calculations and figuring on stuff, and his little pad in his pocket with his pen, and always quick with a riddle or a joke. A trickster.
Yeah.
He was a little trickster. He had that little mischievous,
Yeah, he did.
which made him really, really special too.
Well,
Mom
his-
always used to say, I'll just real quick, Mother always used to say that he would come a lot of times and have a cup of coffee in the morning, and when Rich was a little boy, he would just say, come on, son,
Yeah.
and he would take him with him, and she said they'd be gone 2 hours, and he would bring Rich back, and he never knew where they went or what they did or anything like that. And so I found an old picture. It's been 10 years ago now, and it's Pop holding Rich's hand, and it's his back, and they're headed out.
Oh, I've seen that
To
photo.
the car.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that story that Mother had told me, and I put it on the back of the picture, and I did it kind of like a sepia color, and
Yeah.
I mounted it and framed it and gave it to Rich with a little story about Pop picking him up every day and not knowing where he went, but how proud he was to have that little grandson to carry on the Richardson name. So anyway, okay, well,
And now the Richardson's name's going to die. There's
I know.
no one left.
I know, it's really, really sad.
Not a single one.
It's really sad. Okay,
Okay,
well, we
then,
miss
yeah.
you. Miss you, Pop.
We did.